Organizational learning was a concept that was originally defined by Chris Argus and Donald Schoen in 1978. It is an area of knowledge within organizational theory that studies models and theories about how an organization learns and adapts over time. Chris and Donald originally defined organizational learning as the detection and correction of error over time. Foyle and Lyles, expert on the matters that came later on in 1985, refined the concept to state the process of improving actions through better knowledge and understanding. It was also later iterated and refined over time. Organizational learning can be thought of as a collective learning where not only the person who is doing the job improves, but others in the organization also change the way things are done. It brings about learning and change not only in the individual, but also in the organization's behavior, so that the change not only stays with the individual, but changes the organization's behavior as well. An organization is perceived to retain memory, and an individual's contributions and discoveries can be thought of as the bricks that add on to the organization's overall structure. Although individuals may come and go, the organization retains and has a memory and processes where learning and advancements are stored and recalled over time despite the leadership. Hedberg, an expert on the organizational learning matter from Oxford, once said, "Organizations do not have brains, but they have cognitive systems and memories. Members come and go and leadership changes, but organizations' memories retain certain behaviors, mental maps, norms, and values over time." And Donald identified three levels of learning in the organizational learning theory. There is a single loop, which is essentially following the rules, double loop, which is changing the rules, and deutero loop, the third loop, which is about learning about learning. Argus and Schoen identified the first organizational learning type as single loop learning. It is essentially a way to solve a given problem. The conventional example used to explain single loop learning is the thermostat one. A thermostat operates in one mode. When a room is too cold, it turns on the furnace. When it's too hot, it turns off the furnace. The system is limited to its reaction and has a relatively predictable response set, all of which requires minimal effort. Single-loop learning tends to ask one-dimensional questions to elicit simple one-dimensional answers. These questions almost always ignore the root cause of the underlying problem, like why the error occurred in the first place. In an organization, this form of learning occurs when people try to correct some problem to achieve a desirable outcome. Learning is said to occur when a new action is taken to achieve the desired result upon facing the problem. Single-loop learning often occurs when goals, values, frameworks, and strategies are taken for granted and a relatively unexpected thing happens which prompts sudden action. Another example of this form of learning might be when a client doesn't produce a certain deliverable on time during a project. Anger and frustration might be expressed to the client, and demands might be made to produce the deliverable immediately. Little to no effort is exerted to actually explore why the client was unable to produce a deliverable in the first place, which is a perfect example of single-loop learning. This form of learning is also referred to as lower-level learning, adaptive learning, coping, and even non-strategic learning by various experts on the matter over time. Many experts believe that most organizations operate according to this single-loop learning, where members establish rigid strategies, policies, and procedures, and then spend their time detecting and correcting deviations from these very bureaucratic set of rules.
Double loop learning occurs when, in addition to detection and correction of its errors, the organization question and modify its existing norms, procedures, policies, and objectives. In other words, double loop learning asks questions not only about objective facts, but also about the reasons and motive behind those facts. Double loop learning involves changing the organization's knowledge base or firm-specific capability or routines. Double loop learning is defined as the process by which organization makes sense of its environment in the way that broadens the range of objectives it can pursue or range of the resources and action available to it for processing these objectives. Double loop learning provides opportunity for discontinuous steps of improvement where reframing a problem can bring about radically different potential solutions. So we can say that organizational problem solving capability is increased when double loop learning takes place. Double loop learning assumption underlying current views are questioned and hypotheses about behavior tested publicly. The end result of double loop learning should be increased effectiveness in decision making and better acceptance of failure and mistakes. Double loop learning is a theory of personal change that is oriented towards professional education, especially leadership in organization. It has been applied in context of management and development.
Deutero learning. Deutero learning is the highest organizational learning level, and it occurs after single loop and double loop. It, along with the second level, is the most critical in regards to the success and survival of an organization. The Deutero stage is concerned with how and why to change the organization. It is regarded as learning to learn better. To do so, members must ask fundamental questions about their organization and see what they can do to better the first and second loop decision processes. In this stage, they analyze their decisions, find and correct the errors, then implement that new strategy onto the next decision. This creates better decisions throughout. By using this model, you can set and solve problems and design and redesign policies in an ever-changing environment. This graph illustrates the Deutero learning process. In this stage, everyone reflects back on how they did making previous decisions. They see how they handled the situation, what they did wrong, and how they can improve upon it. Once they find what they did wrong, they address it, then try to correct it in the next decision. They then explore new ways of learning, and then design and implement new strategies based off of the new learning techniques. It is then evaluated and shared only to be put back through the cycle, which creates constant change.